The wind on the moon station of Velis was not real, but it still howled through the alloy corridors. As if it carried ghosts in its breath, Leela ran barefoot down the shining floor, her laughter echoing like sunlight in a place that had none. She was only 16, a human girl born on station and raised among traders, diplomats, and guards. She knew the back halls better than the council guards who pretended to control them. Her hair floated behind her, a soft brown halo in the low gravity, and her eyes burned with a light no one could fake, a human fire, the kind the council feared, but would never admit until the moment came when they made her bleed. The plaza was wide with a glass dome above showing stars that never blinked, and flags from every species hung limp in the still air, and that was where it happened. 3 tall enforcers, wearing the black-silver armor of the Galactic Council, stepped forward and blocked her path. She stopped, confused, not afraid, because fear had never made a home in her heart. She smiled, asked what was wrong, and one of them said she had stolen food from the ambassador's quarters, which was a lie. Everyone in the market knew she helped the poor traders, gave her scraps and bits and tech parts because she helped everyone fix their tools, carried their water, showed kindness where the council offered none, but kindness had no weight in the council's law. They asked no questions, gave no warnings, just declared her guilty, and when she protested, one of them raised a pulse rod and struck her. The sound was wet and sharp, her body hit the floor hard, then twitched once, then stopped, and in that silent second, something deeper than grief spread through the crowd. Humans stood frozen, aliens blinked in confusion and fear, and no one moved until a scream shattered the stillness. It was from Dr. Marin, a human who had seen it all from the market stall. He ran to her, fell to his knees, his hands shaking, trying to revive her, but she was already gone. The guards said nothing, just walked away as if they had killed a bug, as if Lila's light had never mattered, but someone had recorded it, dozens of someone's actually, and within minutes her death spiraled across the station, across systems, across hidden channels, into places the council had never reached. The video showed her face, her voice, her final breath, and on Earth the response was not rage, not yet. It was silence, deadly focused silence. A special council formed in the human command base, known as Blackspire, deep under the ice of Europa. Generals, scientists, diplomats sat without speaking as the video looped again, and when it ended, a woman named Admiral Soren stood up and whispered one word: pray. Her voice cracked like thunder across frozen stone, and that word was encoded, wrapped in a message, and sent directly to the Galactic Council's prime terminal. No threats, no speeches, just that single word. The council laughed when they received it. Some thought it was a joke, others called it a primitive reaction, a meaningless word from an emotional race they underestimated. They always had and always would, until the stars themselves changed their shade, and the humans stopped responding, stopped speaking, stopped sending anything but silence. And silence was not peace, it was the drawing of breath. Before the scream, Dr. Marin left Velis that same night in a small shuttle, barely escaping security, who now saw all humans as unstable. He carried Lila's belongings and a copy of the footage, and he swore as he left that her name would not be forgotten, and that the stars would remember what had been done on that metal ground. And somewhere in the far side of the solar field, a fleet that had not moved in decades opened its eyes, steel dragons of war rising from the depths of oceans and hangars long thought empty. They did not send threats, they did not scream or cry, they simply moved one by one, ship by ship, engine by engine, toward the dark, and across every human colony, from Mars to Orion, from Europa to Kelvin's reach. The children began whispering her name, not in fear, but in honor, and old soldiers took out rusted weapons, and engineers brought out old blueprints, and across the galaxy one word began appearing, etched into walls, drawn on datapads, scrawled in languages not meant for writing. That word was pray, and no one knew yet how much weight it carried, or how many worlds would soon learn what humans meant when they said remember. Her Namathus was not revenge, it was something colder, it was something deeper, and it had just begun. The Galactic Council sat high above the spiral towers of Veratus, their meeting chamber a perfect circle floating above clouds that never shifted. Its walls shimmered with real-time updates from 100 star systems and 1,000 colonies. Yet in that moment, the only message being discussed was a single word: pray. It glowed red on the central screen, pulsing in silence. The ambassadors from the core races scoffed, calling it primitive, emotional, childish. They laughed at the human response to the unfortunate accident on Velis, brushing off Lila's death as nothing more than an isolated incident, handled within protocol. Ambassador Drozel of the Karkari leaned back, his scales clicking softly, and said the humans are unpredictable, but their bark is worse than their bite. They will move on, they always do, let them grieve. The council voted quickly to ignore the message, declaring no further action needed. But not everyone agreed. In the back corner of the chamber, Ambassador Soleil of the Viren species, a quiet observer for years, watched the word pulse on the screen and felt a chill run down her spine. She had studied human history, not the watered down reports circulated by the Council, but the real archives, the ones that spoke of wars, of loss, of survival against extinction. She knew what it meant. When humans stopped talking and started moving on the fringes of Council space, strange reports began to filter in. A research outpost on Rethos stopped responding entirely. No distress beacon, no data stream, nothing. A patrol was sent, but they found nothing, just scorched metal, a crater, and carved into the remains the word prey. They tried to censor it, bury it as pirate activity, but then came the second blow. A listening station near the dead moon of Kareth vanished in one night, 900 lives gone. Not a single signal captured. The Council's investigators were baffled. No evidence of conventional weapons, no trace of energy blasts. It was as if the station had simply ceased to exist once again. The word prey appeared etched into the last known relay. Low panic began to grow in the shadows. Diplomats whispered of human retaliation, of technology never revealed, of artificial intelligence far beyond Council comprehension. Some claimed humans had always hidden their true power. Others believed it was just rogue elements, extremists, acting on their own. The truth, however, was darker and far more organized. Eden Earth. The silence continued. No press conferences, no public statements, no apology requests, no threats, just preparations. Massive human fleets were gathering in secret places built underground or beneath the ocean's awakening. Systems that had been sleeping for generations. Human leaders met behind closed doors. Old war heroes, long retired, were being called back into service. Engineers worked without sleep, updating propulsion systems, reinforcing old hulls. Every human nation had agreed on one thing: this was not a war for territory or pride. This was justice delivered with precision and finality in a hidden facility deep beneath the Martian surface, known only as Cradle. Protocol Nova was activated. It was not a super weapon, but something far worse: a tactical intelligence capable of thinking like 100 admirals, with no emotion, no mercy. Its sole objective was to dismantle the Galactic Council piece by piece, one system at a time, until the name Leela was written in the stars themselves. As Ambassador Soleil tried to warn the Council, she stood before them with real evidence, showed them the patterns, the disappearances, the silent movements of human scout vessels. But the others dismissed her again and again. They said she was paranoid, or worse, sympathetic to a race known for rebellion. They refused to believe that humans who once begged for a seat at the table now stood poised to flip the entire table over. Meanwhile, in the shadow depths of space, a human stealth cruiser known only as Ghostblade passed through the outer rim of Council territory undetected. It left no trail, used no standard comms, and carried no identifying marks. Inside were 50 of Earth's most elite operatives, trained not just in combat, but in psychological warfare, cultural manipulation, and surgical strikes. They did not see themselves as soldiers, but as instruments of balance. Their mission was not to conquer, but to erase in the colony world of Narthus. A message arrived through unknown channels. The system governor opened it, expecting another routine update. Instead, the screen lit with a single word: prey. Seconds later, all power in the city vanished, as if the stars themselves blinked out. Residents looked up into the dark sky and saw nothing, yet something was there, watching, waiting. And then, as silently as it came, the power returned. But every data record had been wiped, and in its place was a single repeating signal. Her name was Lilithir. Now began to take root across the mid-sector. Species that had once looked down on humans began locking their doors, updating their shields, sending quiet messages to Earth, offering alliance, or at least neutrality. They had seen what humans were capable of during the plague wars, when no one else would venture into the dead zones. Humans went in and survived. When other species collapsed under pressure, humans adapted, evolved, endured. And now they were silent again, and that silence was deafening. Still, the Council refused to act. Not truly. They deployed more fleets, posted more guards, issued public statements of unity and strength, but behind their eyes was fear, and behind that fear was a growing certainty that something had changed, that this was no longer about politics or power, that they had done something irreversible, and the humans would not forget. And they would never forgive. Ian, somewhere far from any known star, in a secret command vessel, an old human general watched a screen displaying the word prey and whispered softly, "They still think we are warning them. We are not." This is their eulogy, and they do not even know it yet. The third blow came not with fire, but with silence and confusion. The mining world of Zethern 7 simply stopped existing. Its communication array went offline in the middle of a standard trade report. The orbital satellites disappeared within seconds, and the defense grid which had been operational for decades, showed no sign of struggle, no activation logs, no warning. All sensor logs showed nothing approaching, nothing leaving, and nothing remaining, only static. Then one final burst of signal surged through the emergency beacon, with only a single word burned into the frequency: Praith Galactic Council. Panicked, this time not in public, but behind closed doors. Generals demanded immediate answers, admirals argued over phantom threats, and data anomaly security heads pointed fingers at each other. Species that had once mocked humanity now held closed meetings analyzing everything they had ever known about humans, but they understood too little, and they understood it too late. They had always seen humans as emotionally unstable, quick to anger, yet easily pacified, as species of unpredictable children with dangerous toys. They had never truly studied the parts of human nature that mattered, the parts born not from war, but from loss, from pain, from the ancient blood-soaked history of a world where extinction had been humanity's first teacher. Back on Earth there were no celebrations, no televised victories, only silence and cold precision. The humans did not want war, they wanted the memory of Leela to be carved into the very fabric of galactic history. They wanted her name to ring louder than any council title or alien anthem. She was not just a girl, she was the spark, the line. They had crossed the drop of blood that turned the tide deep with an immobile command ship, known only as Judgment, orbiting a rogue planet in the shadow void. Human command ran simulation strategy models and psychological assessments, not to destroy the council entirely, but to dismantle its image, its grip, and its authority. Human strategy was never about overpowering, it was about striking where it hurt most, and vanishing before the scream could escape. The council sent probe scouts, even bounty hunters, but nothing returned, and those few that did came back broken eyes, wide hands shaking. Some never spoke again, some only repeated the same phrase: they are not coming, they are already here. A secret transmission leaked from a council outpost in Sector Varric 17 showed footage of what appeared to be a human vessel hovering above the clouds, completely silent, cloaked in technology no one could identify. It moved with unnatural grace, disappearing between camera frames, and when they tried to track it, the signal fried every system. It touched the last frame, captured the ship's name, etched across its hull in alien blood: Lila's Mercy Be. Now, entire planets began closing their ports to council vessels. Local militias refused to follow council orders, and whispers of rebellion echoed across the outer rim. A new symbol began to appear, etched into walls and screens of flame inside a child's hand, with the word "pray" glowing beneath it. Not a command, but a reminder of what had been done, and what still remained unfinished. Head Ambassador Soleil watched from her homeworld as her own people began withdrawing from the Council Alliance, not in protest, but in quiet fear. She received an anonymous data chip containing footage from the Velis incident. From new angles unreleased to the public, it showed more than just Lila's death. It showed the faces of the enforcers, their laughter after the strike, their dismissal of her body like trash. It showed Dr. Marin screaming for help, being pushed back as he tried to hold her hand, her fingers twitching one last time before going still. And then it showed a child alien watching, crying, hiding behind a crate, a silent witness to a crime that would ignite Galaxias. Tried again to bring this to the council. She begged them to see reason to stop before it was too late, but they only silenced her again, dismissed her again, branded her unstable, and then replaced her with a younger ambassador, one who wore golden robes and spoke only of council strength and unity. But outside those chambers, unity was crumbling, and strength was becoming a myth. Humans struck again, this time not with ships or guns, but with truth. They hacked the council data network and replaced every major news feed with Lila's footage, not altered, not weaponized, just raw and real, and then added recordings of the destroyed stations, the final words of dying officers, the audio of confused commanders whispering the word "pray" over and over again. Every being in council space saw it. No one could escape it, not even the core worlds, where control had always been strongest. Panic spread faster than any virus. Governors resigned, entire military units vanished, defected, or surrendered without engagement. And every time something disappeared or collapsed, the word "pray" followed, as if carried on the wind. Written in ash, spoken in whispers, scratched into metal and coded into light pulses. Still the council refused to yield. Instead they declared humanity an enemy state and issued capture orders for all known human citizens in council space. Those who were caught were tortured for answers, but gave none because they knew nothing of the larger plan. And those who escaped became living ghosts, spreading the story further, deeper, cutting into the heart of the Empyrean Earth. The memorial for Leela was finished. Not a statue, not a monument, but a living garden grown inside a ring of crushed council metal shaped like the plaza, Where she had died, her name was planted in flowers that only bloomed under human gravity. Her story was taught in every school, not as a call to vengeance, but as a lesson in silence and resolve. The war had not truly begun yet, but the message had, and the galaxy now understood. This was not about warships or lasers, it was about a reckoning, a quiet one, a patient one. And the humans were no longer warning them, they were simply counting down, without numbers, without sound, just the weight of a girl whose smile had become their battle cry, and whose death had become the shape of their wrath. Galactic Council gathered once again, this time not with arrogance but with trembling urgency. Their golden chamber, once a symbol of strength, now felt cold, hollow. Flickering screens behind them showed chaos spreading across sectors. One by one, border colonies declared neutrality or outright rebellion. Transport lanes were abandoned, civilian ships vanished without trace, and always the word "prey" followed like a shadow that refused to die. And yet the Council still clung to their illusion of control. They deployed the 7th Fleet toward the human boundary, a massive show of force meant to remind the galaxy who ruled the stars. But what returned from that mission was not victory. It was silence. Entire fleets stopped transmitting, entire systems went dark with no sign of battle. No wreckage, no signals, not even distress calls. Just blank silence, like a breath that had never been taken. And then from those systems came one signal each time, on every band, on every language, her name, Leela, the word "prey," and the scream of static that made some listeners bleed from the ears. Human technology had evolved far beyond what the Council once studied. The humans had stopped using predictable tactics. They were using sound manipulation, data interference, gravitational echoes, things that the Council could not trace, could not counter, could not understand. Admiral Selen of the Drakkar species led the next effort. He was one of the few still respected by every Council race, ruthless and calculating. He promised to bring answers. He deployed a scout armada to locate the source of the disappearances and followed it himself with 3 dreadnoughts. They reached the Tessa Void, a place known for being barren, lifeless. But when they arrived, they saw lights, movement, and then shapes, massive structures orbiting a dead star, hidden from all maps, impossible to detect unless you were led there. And waiting within that silence was a human fleet blacker than space itself. Theffer Selen could issue a command. Every control system on his ship died. Alarm screamed. Artificial gravity failed. The hull cracked inward as if pulled by hands too large to be natural. And in the last moment before his ship vanished, the data log recorded a single image, a child's face, smiling eyes, closed lips, moving silently, mouthing the word "prey." The Council lost contact with the entire task force in under 5 minutes, and they never spoke of it publicly again. Back on Earth, human leadership was not celebrating. They were preparing for the next phase. They did not want the Council destroyed. They wanted it remembered, broken, remembered for what it had done. They had no interest in ruling the galaxy, no interest in conquest. They only wanted justice, and silence was their method. The fleets moved without name, without light, guided by Nova, the tactical mind of humanity, who now calculated probability curves based not on victory, but on transformation. Deepen the underworld of the galactic black markets. Human agents began appearing. They posed as traders, healers, mechanics, and they spread one thing: not weapons, not viruses, but stories. They told the tale of Leela to every race in every dialect. They showed the video of her death to anyone who asked, and always ended with the word "prey." And everywhere they went, the people listened and began to question what else the Council had hidden. What other truths were buried in databanks and erased from records? Ambassador Soleil, now working in exile, received visitors from many races. Those who once avoided her now came with gifts of data, stolen files, secrets. They wanted protection, not from humanity, but from the collapse they saw coming, the collapse the humans had warned about, not with speeches, but with silence and shadows. And so she gathered it all, every confession, every whispered regret, and she sent it to Earth. Without request, without demand, just a message of respect, an apology, and a copy of the Council's most forbidden document, the order that had approved the killing of Lilith. The Council once believed that controlling the flow of information controlled the galaxy. They never imagined that a single child's final breath would outlast their strongest propaganda. Now even their allies were abandoning them. Entire communication hubs refused to relay Council orders. The Interstellar News Network openly aired human transmissions. And for the first time in Council history, the citizens began demanding answers, not from humans, but from their own rulers. A new symbol appeared across the colonies, a silhouette of a child standing before a blazing star, hands open, not in anger, but in sorrow. Below it, the word "prey" written in dozens of languages and etched into wall, ships, tattoos, and even currency. It was not rebellion, it was revelation. The humans had not inspired hate, they had awakened grief, and in that grief came understanding. And in that understanding came change. The council held one last emergency session. They screamed at each other, accused each other of sabotage, betrayal, cowardice. Some demanded peace, others called for full-scale extermination, but no one agreed. And when the meeting ended, all they could do was watch as more systems slipped through their fingers, more fleets went dark, and more statues of Leela rose in places they could no longer reach. And in the silence between stars, the human fleet gathered again, this time not hidden, this time not in shadow, their ships aligned before the edge of the council's inner core. No weapons raised, no threats made, only a single transmission sent to every planet in range. A voice quiet but firm and human, and filled with the kind of calm that comes after the storm, saying, "We are not here for war, we are here for memory. You killed our child, and now we will make sure no one ever forgets her name." And when the voice ended, the stars blinked once as if in agreement. And then came the word "pray" again, echoing into the void, and the war that had never been declared moved into its final phase. On the edge of the inner council worlds, where light from their golden cities still reached the skies, something shifted. Entire military stations, once symbols of council strength, found their ranks thinning, not from enemy fire, but from within. Soldiers resigned, officers vanished, and many simply laid down their arms and walked away. No orders could hold them. No loyalty to the council could outweigh what they now felt, a burning truth buried for too long and awakened by the face of one human child, whose story had been whispered into every soul, from the black markets of the Outer Rim to the noble halls of ancient species whose bloodline stretched back before the first star. Her name had become more than a name, it had become a question, a memory, a fire in the dark. She had no army, no weapon, no throne, and yet her death had done what no war could do. It had broken the illusion of peace, the illusion of justice, and now the fractures ran through every foundation the council had built. At the center of this collapse stood the human fleet, not conquering, not demanding, only waiting and watching. Their ships formed a ring of silence around the central trade spine, the lifeline of council economy. They did not fire a single shot. Instead, they activated signal disruptors that turned the entire spine into a dead zone. Nothing could pass, no data, no cargo, no command. The message was clear. The time for words had passed and the time for reckoning had begun. And yet, amid the falling pillars of council power, something unexpected happened. A group of diplomats from lesser-known species approached the human command vessel, unarmed, no ships, no protection, just a single vessel carrying documents, videos, audio files. Everything the council had tried to erase. These races had once been silenced, afraid of council punishment. Now they offered truth in exchange for safety, but not for themselves, for their children, for their people who had also suffered, who had also watched their loved ones vanish. Beneath council orders, human Admiral Jonas, tall and quiet, stood before them, not with pride, but with heavy eyes, and listened as one of the diplomats, a small, gray-skinned being with trembling hands, showed him footage of their own version of Leela, a child taken during a council raid, never returned, never named. Jonas said nothing, only nodded, and added the footage to the growing archive, an archive that had now spread into every system through human-coded bursts impossible to stop, even by the most advanced council encryption networks. While the council flailed and shouted and tore at each other with blame, humans moved with calm and unity. Operatives infiltrated council archives, removing files, exposing cover-ups, revealing betrayals. Planets that had once knelt before council rule now burned their flags and declared independence. Entire fleets switched allegiance, not out of fear, but out of shame, for what they had once protected. And above all this movement, above all this silence and storm, hovered one word: pray. The council leader, a creature known only as the Prime, sat in a sealed chamber surrounded by failing monitors. He issued order after order, but no one responded, not even his elite guard remained. And still he refused to accept the truth. He demanded an assault on Earth, demanded the total erasure of the human species. He did not understand that the war was not about humans anymore. It was about everyone the council had ever silenced, ever crushed, ever used and discarded. In the moon of Helion, a council weapons lab was seized, not by force, but by its own workers. They opened the gates and welcomed human engineers who entered, not with bombs, but with data pads and purpose. They disassembled the lab, took everything that could be used for harm, and turned it into a healing center. The same happened across 20 other council facilities, all within days. The collapse was no longer a theory, it was a reality unfolding with every breath. And in the great city of Veratus, once the shining jewel of the council, the central plaza was filled not with soldiers or police, but with people, civilians, humans, aliens, children, parents, refugees. They all gathered beneath a towering hologram, not of a leader, not of a flag, but of Leela, her image flickering as she laughed, ran, and smiled. Then her last moment recorded from that cursed plaza on Velis, her voice asking why, her hands reaching. And then still the crowd said nothing, they only listened, and at the end the hologram faded. And the message returned again, and again her name and the word pray. Admiral Jonas stood among them, in silence, his uniform marked not by rank, but by a small patch shaped like a flower, the same flower that bloomed in the memorial garden. Back on Earth beside him stood Ambassador Soleil, tears in her eyes, as she whispered that the council was over, not destroyed, but undone by its own hands, and that now something new had to rise, something better, something that would remember not just the powerful, but the fallen. And still there were those who feared humanity, who waited for the strike that would never come. But that was the final lesson Leela had taught them. Humans did not destroy to rule, they remembered to protect. And their silence had never been weakness, it had been mourning. And now as that mourning turned to movement, the stars themselves seemed to lean in closer, watching as a new chapter began, written not in conquest, but in memory, and the name of a child who had never held a weapon, and never spoken a threat, but whose death had shaken the pillars of a galaxy to its core. The Galactic Council could no longer ignore the tides that had turned against them. The corridors of their palatial chambers, once filled with confident voices, were now heavy with whispers of fear, desperation, and fractured loyalty. The prime being whose centuries had been marked by iron will and unyielding control sat isolated within the heart of the capital, his eyes scanning endless reports. None brought good news. The humans had advanced far beyond what anyone had anticipated, and their silent war was unraveling the very fabric of the council's dominion. Mers, the jewel of human colonization and the cradle of their resistance, became the focal point of the council's final desperate gamble. A massive fleet assembled with the intent not only to crush the human rebellion, but to send a warning that no species could defy the council with impunity. The ships gleamed with new weapons, pulsating with energy, and the war preparations that had once seemed a distant threat now loomed like a dark storm over the red planet. And the surface Mars was quiet, as if holding its breath. The humans had evacuated civilians to underground sanctuaries and military units prepared with calm precision. Despite the overwhelming force poised against them, they did not panic. They moved not with fury, but with calculated grace. Each soldier, engineer, and pilot knowing the stakes were higher than just survival. They fought for a future born from the memory of a girl whose death had sparked a revolution. The battle began without fanfare. A pulse of energy waves tore through space and met human shields, but they held firm. The humans unleashed countermeasures, not just of firepower, but of sound and light, bending fields that twisted gravity and disoriented the council forces. The fleet faltered as their technology struggled against what seemed like a living strategy, a mind that anticipated every move. Without emotion, without hesitation, Admiral Jonas stood on the bridge of the flagship, the calm eye of the storm, watching as enemy ships burned in silent arcs across the void. His voice was steady as he commanded strikes that crippled but never destroyed critical systems. To avoid unnecessary loss of life, this was not slaughter, this was reckoning. A message sent not with hatred, but with undeniable resolve. As the last council dreadnought fell silent and drifted away, the humans initiated a ceasefire. A transmission cut through all channels, broadcasting live to every council system. The face of a young woman appeared, her features serene, yet fierce. She spoke softly in the common tongue, recounting the story of Leela, her innocence stolen, and the peace shattered by cruelty. She spoke of justice and mercy, of memory and warning, and when she finished, she looked directly into the cameras and whispered the word pray. The galaxy listened in stunned silence. Some wept, others clenched fists, and many remained silent, for in that moment, the truth of what had been lost and what could still be saved was laid bare. No one could deny the power behind that single word. No one could ignore the strength of a species who could destroy an empire not with endless war, but with unwavering remembrance. Bend the scenes. Negotiations began for the first time in decades. The council was fractured. The humans, no longer the supplicants, but the arbiters of peace. Representatives from countless species met in a neutral zone, where old grievances were aired and new alliances forged. The process was slow, painful, but it was real, and it was hope. Ambassador Soleil watched the talks with cautious optimism. Her heart carried the weight of loss, but also the glimmer of redemption. She had seen the depths of human resilience, and now understood that their true power lay not in weapons or fleets, but in their spirit and their refusal to be forgotten. The memory of Leela became a symbol not of vengeance, but of change, a reminder that every life mattered, and that silence could be louder than any cry. The word pray spread beyond the borders of conflict, becoming a call for reflection, peace, and vigilance against injustice. As the galaxy began to rebuild old wounds, Slowly healing new bonds forming, the humans continued to teach and share their story, not as conquerors but as guardians of memory. The war had ended not with explosions but with understanding, and the quiet power of a single human child whose name would forever echo among the star sand. So the universe learned that sometimes the greatest battles are not fought with weapons, but with truth, and that the legacy of one could inspire the hope of many. And in the stillness between worlds, a soft voice whispered again. Praith Galaxy was quiet now, but that quiet was not peace. It was the calm after a storm. The stars shone with a new light, as if remembering a promise long forgotten. Across planets and moons, memorials to Leela stood tall, not as monuments to war, but as beacons of warning and hope. Her story told in every language, every culture, and every corner of human space. And beyond, children learned her name not as a tale of sorrow, but as a call to courage and resiliency. In a small farm under the twin suns of a distant world, a child sat beside their grandfather, watching the stars twinkle like distant fires. The child asked softly, who was Leela, and why did the whole galaxy speak her name? The old man smiled, a tired smile filled with the weight of memories. He looked up at the night sky and began to speak in a voice steady and warm. Leela was a girl like any other. She laughed, she dreamed, and she believed in kindness. But she lived in a time when the galaxy was not kind, when power was taken with violence, and truth was hidden behind lies. She stood in a plaza on a faraway moon and faced those who did not understand what it meant to be human. She paid the price for our mistakes, but in her death she gave us a warning that we must never forget that cruelty will always have consequences, that silence can become a storm, and that sometimes the smallest voice can shake the mightiest empire. The child listened wide-eyed as the grandfather continued. Leela was not just our past. She is our future, a symbol of what happens when a people are pushed too far, but also of what can happen when they stand together, when they remember, when they pray, not just with words but with their hearts, their actions, and their live as across the galaxy. The new council formed not from domination, but from cooperation, different species with different histories working to build a future where no child would have to die for justice, and where every voice could be heard, where peace was not an absence of conflict, but a presence of understanding and respect. And at the center of this new hope was the legacy of Leela, the girl who became more than a memory. In the years that followed, humanity did not seek to rule, but to guide, sharing their experiences, their struggles, and their resilience. They became a bridge between worlds, teaching that strength is not always measured by power but by the willingness to protect the weak, to stand for what is right, and to never forget the cost of silencing. So the story ends not with an explosion or a battle, but with a promise that the light of one child can ignite the courage of many, and that the galaxy will never again ignore the warning whispered softly but clearly across the stars, a single word that carries the weight of history and the hope of tomorrow. Praith Galaxy breathed in quiet after the long storm of war, and whispers, the stars themselves seemed to hum with a new song, a song of memory and hope, where the name Leela was spoken with reverence, not as a wound, but as a guiding light across countless worlds. Children gathered beneath the night skies, hearing tales of a girl whose courage had changed everything, who taught that even in the darkest moments, a single voice could awaken a universe. In a small hill overlooking a peaceful valley, an old man sat with his grandchild, their eyes fixed on the tapestry of stars above. The child asked who Leela was and why her name carried so much weight. The grandfather's eyes shone with the wisdom of years. He spoke softly, telling the story of a girl who faced cruelty without fear, who stood for kindness in a world that tried to silence her. He told how her death was not the end, but the beginning of a change so profound it reshaped the fate of Galaxia. She explained that Leela's legacy was a promise that no injustice would go unanswered, that silence could be a powerful force, and that the strength of a people is measured not by the wars they win, but by the peace they build from the ashes. The child listened with wide eyes and a heart full of wonder, understanding that sometimes the smallest voices carry the greatest power. Across the stars, the new council worked not as rulers, but as guardians of peace, different species united by respect and the shared memory of what had been lost. They built bridges where there were once walls, sought understanding where there had been fear, and promised that no child would ever again pay the price for the mistakes of others. Humanity did not seek to conquer or command. Instead, they became teachers, storytellers, and protectors, showing the galaxy that true power lies in compassion, courage, and remembrance. They carried Leela's name not as a banner of war, but as a beacon of hope, lighting the way toward a future where every life mattered and every voice could be hardened. So the story closes on a universe forever changed by a single name, a name whispered in the winds of countless worlds, A name that reminds all who listen that even in the vastness of space, one person's light can never be extinguished, and that when the darkest night falls, the only prayer worth saying is the one born from memory and hope. Pray the end.